You have more choices than almost any human being who has ever lived. More potential careers, more potential partners, more potential cities, philosophies, identities, ways of structuring a single afternoon. You can become almost anything. You can leave almost anything. The doors in front of you are, in a very real and historically unusual sense, mostly open. And you're stuck. Not stuck because nothing is available. Stuck because everything is. You scroll through options for relationships the way you scroll through options for a show to watch, endlessly comparing, never quite committing, because committing means closing every other door, and closing doors feels like loss even when the door you're closing was never going to lead anywhere good. You keep your career options vaguely open even when you've been in the same field for years, because fully committing, actually deciding this is what I do, this is who I am, feels like giving something up that you can't quite name. You hover at the edge of decisions, at the edge of relationships, at the edge of your own life in a way, watching it from a slight distance instead of stepping fully into it. A philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard wrote about this almost 200 years ago, before any of our current technology existed, before the modern explosion of options. And what he said applies to this moment with an accuracy that should be unsettling. He said that human beings are not actually free when they have infinite options. They're free when they commit. And committing, he said, requires something most people spend their entire lives avoiding: a leap. Let me explain what he meant by that, because it's easy to misread as just take a risk or go for it. Phrases that get printed on coffee mugs and don't carry the actual weight of what he was describing. Kierkegaard was writing about a very specific kind of fear, the fear that comes not from danger, but from freedom itself. Most fear is about something specific. You're afraid of heights, or rejection, or failure. There's an object to the fear, something you can point to. But there's another kind of fear that doesn't have a clear object. It's the fear that arrives when you're standing in front of a genuinely open choice, when nothing is forcing your hand, when you could go any number of directions, and the responsibility for choosing rests entirely on you. He called this anxiety, and he meant something specific by it, not nervousness about a particular outcome, the dizziness of freedom itself, the vertigo of realizing that you are the one who has to decide, and there's no longer a script, a tradition, an authority telling you which way to go. This is the exact feeling most people have when they're staring at infinite options, not excitement, vertigo. A kind of paralysis that comes from too much possibility rather than too little. And the way most people respond to that vertigo is to avoid the choice entirely, to stay in the in-between, to keep all the doors open because closing any of them, even towards something good, means feeling the full weight of having decided. I want to describe what this looks like in an actual life because Kierkegaard's language can sound abstract if it stays in the philosophy. Think about someone who has been dating for years without ever quite settling into a committed relationship. Not because they haven't met anyone worthwhile. Often they have, multiple times. But each time, as things start to get serious, something pulls them back. A doubt. A sense that maybe there's someone better suited somewhere, if they just keep looking a little longer. They're not doing this maliciously. They're doing it because committing to one person means giving up the possibility of every other person. And in a culture that constantly suggests there might be something better just one swipe away, that possibility feels too valuable to close off. So they stay in the threshold, dating but never quite arriving, open to commitment in theory but never actually choosing it in practice. Or think about someone who has spent a decade unsure about their career, moving between fields, never quite settling because settling feels like giving up on all the other versions of themselves they might have become. The writer they might have been if they'd pursued that instead, the entrepreneur, the person who moved abroad and built a completely different life. Each path foreclosed by commitment feels like a small death, So they avoid commitment. They stay generalist, keep their options technically open, tell themselves they're still deciding even after years of not deciding. In both cases, what looks like freedom, all those open doors, actually produces a specific kind of suffering. Because a life spent keeping every door open is a life that never actually walks through any of them. Kierkegaard had a name for the way most people live before they make this leap. He called it the aesthetic stage. This isn't about art in the narrow sense. It's about a particular orientation toward life, one based on immediate experience, pleasure, interest, and constant openness to new possibilities. The aesthetic person is, in a sense, a connoisseur of their own life. They sample experiences. They keep things interesting. They move from one source of stimulation to the next, always curious, always a little detached, because full attachment to any one thing would mean losing access to all the others. This sounds appealing, and in some ways it is. The aesthetic life can be genuinely rich, full of variety and interest and new experiences. But Kierkegaard pointed out something important about it. It has no center. It's reactive rather than chosen. The aesthetic person is at the mercy of whatever's most interesting right now. And what's most interesting right now is, by definition, always changing. Which means the aesthetic person never actually becomes anyone in particular. They remain a collection of interesting experiences without ever crystallizing into a self that has actually decided what it values, what it's for, what it's willing to commit to, even when something more interesting comes along. This is the trap of an age with too many options. Not that you experience too little, that you experience constant novelty without ever building the kind of depth that only comes from staying with one thing long enough for it to actually become yours. This is the part of the conversation most people are too distracted to have. If it's reaching you, subscribe. We go here every week. Here's the move Kierkegaard actually proposed, and it's harder than it sounds. He said that the way out of the aesthetic trap isn't more options, more experience, more careful comparison shopping among possible lives. It's the leap. A decision made not because you've calculated your way to certainty, because certainty isn't actually available, not for the decisions that matter most, but because you've decided to commit anyway, fully, without the safety net of keeping your other options technically open. This is what he meant by the ethical stage, the level above the aesthetic. It's not about morality in the simple sense. It's about the decision to actually become someone, to choose values, a path, a person, a way of living, and then to live inside that choice with full seriousness, rather than treating it as one option among many that you're still evaluating. The leap is frightening precisely because it can't be justified by certainty. If you wait until you're certain a relationship will work, you'll wait forever because that certainty never arrives. If you wait until you're certain a career path is the right one, the same thing happens. Certainty isn't available before commitment. It only develops after, through the actual experience of living inside the choice you've made. This is genuinely uncomfortable for a culture that prizes information, optimization, and making the statistically best decision. Kierkegaard is saying something almost the opposite of that. He's saying that some of the most important decisions in a life can't be optimized. They can only be leapt into. And the leap, by definition, happens before you know how it turns out. I want to talk about why this is so hard now specifically, more than it might have been in Kierkegaard's own time. Because the options available to a person today are genuinely staggering compared to almost any other point in history. Not just romantic options or career options, but the sheer volume of information about every choice, reviews, comparisons, other people's experiences, alternate paths you could examine in detail before committing to anything. This information feels like it should make decisions easier. In some ways it does. But in another more important way, it makes the leap harder, because it constantly presents you with the impression that more research, more comparison, more careful evaluation will eventually produce certainty. It won't. Because the kind of certainty you're looking for, the certainty that this is definitely the right choice, that you won't regret it, that something better wasn't available, doesn't exist for the decisions that actually matter. You can research forever and you'll never reach it. What you'll reach instead is exhaustion, a specific kind of decision fatigue that comes from treating every choice as a research project rather than a leap. And the exhaustion often produces the opposite of clarity. It produces paralysis, or a kind of numb default, staying where you are, not because you've chosen it, but because choosing anything else feels too effortful given how much evaluation it would require. This is one of the quieter costs of having so many options. Not that you make bad decisions, that you stop making decisions at all in the genuine sense, and instead drift into whatever requires the least active commitment. Let me say something about what the leap actually feels like, because I don't want to make it sound like a single dramatic moment. It's not usually one grand gesture. It's a posture you take toward a decision you've already been circling. You've probably been circling something for a while. A relationship you haven't fully committed to, even though you know, underneath the hedging, what you actually want. A career direction you've been keeping vague, even though some part of you has known for years which way you're actually drawn. A move, a project, a way of living that you've been treating as one option among many, when really you've already chosen it in every way except the actual declaration. The leap, in most real lives, is less about discovering something new and more about finally admitting what you already know and acting on it fully. Closing the other doors not because you're certain they were worse, but because you've decided this is the door you're walking through, and walking through it fully requires not keeping one foot in all the others. This is uncomfortable because it requires you to give up the comfort of, "I haven't decided yet." That phrase, repeated for years, can feel like safety. It isn't. It's just a slower, quieter way of letting time decide for you by default, without you ever actually choosing. I want to talk about what's on the other side of the leap, because Kierkegaard wasn't simply telling people to jump and hoping it works out. He believed something important happens after commitment that can't happen before it. Before the leap, you're evaluating a relationship, a path, a commitment from the outside, weighing it against alternatives, always slightly removed because you haven't actually entered it yet. After the leap, after you've actually committed fully, without the hedge of keeping other options open, something different becomes possible. You start to experience the choice from the inside. You discover things about it that were never available to the outside evaluator, because they only emerge through the actual experience of living inside the commitment. This is true of relationships. The depth that becomes available in a relationship where both people have actually committed, where the question of whether to stay isn't being constantly relitigated, is different in kind from anything available in a relationship still being evaluated from a comparative distance. Not because commitment makes things easier, because it removes a layer of self-protection that prevents real intimacy. And what's revealed underneath that layer is something you couldn't have accessed any other way. This is true of work as well. The mastery, the depth of skill, the genuine satisfaction that comes from staying with one craft long enough to actually become excellent at it. None of that is available to someone who's still keeping their options open, still wondering if they should be doing something else, still treating their current path as provisional. The leap isn't reckless. It's the precondition for a category of experience that simply isn't available any other way. Here's something I think gets missed about Kierkegaard's idea, something that matters specifically for people drowning in modern options. He wasn't saying you should commit to literally anything just to escape the discomfort of choosing. The leap isn't arbitrary. It requires what he called inwardness, a kind of honest self-examination that happens before the leap, where you actually sit with the question of what you genuinely want, rather than what looks good, what's expected, what would be easiest to defend to other people. This is different from the endless external comparison that the aesthetic stage involves. It's an internal process, quieter, less about gathering more information from outside, and more about finally being honest with yourself about what you've actually known for a while. Most people skip this step. They either stay in indefinite comparison mode, endlessly evaluating, or they leap into something without ever doing the internal work of checking whether it's actually theirs, committing to a path because it's expected, or impressive, or available, rather than because it emerged from genuine self-examination. Both of these miss what Kierkegaard was actually pointing toward. The leap he described isn't reckless abandonment of thought. It's what comes after the thought has done what thought can do, and you've reached the edge of what evaluation alone can tell you. At that edge, more comparison won't help. Only the leap will. I want to address something that comes up immediately when people hear this. What if I leap and I'm wrong? This fear is real, and Kierkegaard didn't dismiss it, but he reframed it in a way that I think is genuinely useful. The choice isn't between a leap that might be wrong and a position of safety where you never have to be wrong. There is no safe position. Staying in the threshold, refusing to commit, keeping every option open, that's also a choice, with its own consequences, its own cost, its own version of being wrong. The person who never commits to a relationship because they might choose wrong has already chosen something, a life without the depth that only comes from committed intimacy. That's not a neutral, safe default. It's an outcome, just a quieter and less examined one. The person who never commits to a path because they might choose wrong has already chosen something, a life of perpetual potential that never becomes actual. That's also an outcome. Once you see it this way, the question changes. It's not, should I risk being wrong by committing versus staying safely uncommitted? It's, which kind of wrong am I willing to live with? The wrong of a leap that doesn't work out, or the wrong of never having leapt at all? For most people, when they actually sit with that question honestly, the second kind of wrong is worse, because the first kind of wrong at least comes with the experience of having lived something fully. The second kind comes with nothing except the accumulating years of having stood at the threshold. Let me say something about regret, because it's the thing underneath most of this fear. People who study what dying people actually regret have found something consistent. It's rarely the leap that didn't work out. It's almost always the leap they never took, the relationship they were too afraid to fully commit to, the career direction they kept vague instead of pursuing fully, the move, the creative project, the version of themselves they kept circling without ever stepping into. This makes sense once you understand what Kierkegaard was describing. A leap that doesn't work out is still a leap. It still produced an actual life, actual experience, actual depth. Even if the specific outcome wasn't what you hoped for, you learned something from it that you could only learn by being inside it. A leap never taken produces nothing. No depth, no mastery, no real intimacy, no actual experience of having lived that particular life. Just the accumulating, quiet, low-grade cost of having stood at every threshold and never walked through. That cost doesn't announce itself the way a failed leap does. It's not dramatic. It just accumulates, year after year, into a life that was technically full of options and experientially thin. There's a stage beyond the ethical one that Kierkegaard described, and I think it's worth mentioning even though it's the hardest to translate into everyday terms. He called it the religious stage, and even if you're not religious in any conventional sense, the structure of what he's pointing at matters. The ethical stage, the stage of committed, chosen values, of having leapt into a life that's actually yours, is genuinely good. It's better than the aesthetic stage of endless comparison and detachment. But Kierkegaard thought there was something beyond even that. He noticed that even committed ethical people sometimes face situations where doing the right thing according to their chosen framework isn't enough. Where life presents something that the rules, however carefully chosen, don't quite cover. Where you have to leap again beyond your own carefully constructed ethical system into something that can't be fully justified by the framework you built. The most famous example he used was the biblical story of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son. Whatever you make of the religious content, the structural point is this. Sometimes the deepest commitments in life require you to go beyond what any system of rules, however carefully examined, can fully justify. You act from something more fundamental than calculation. Faith, in his sense, isn't about religious belief specifically. It's about the capacity to commit beyond what reason alone can secure. For most people, this shows up in much smaller, much less dramatic ways than Abraham's story. It shows up as the moment in a long relationship where loving someone fully requires a commitment that goes beyond what you can rationally justify in the moment. Staying not because the spreadsheet says it's the optimal choice today, but because you've made a deeper commitment that holds even when the immediate calculation gets difficult. It shows up as continuing to pursue a creative project that has stopped making practical sense because something more fundamental than practicality is now involved. The point isn't that you should abandon reason. It's that the deepest human commitments eventually ask something of you that pure calculation can't provide. And recognizing that, rather than constantly searching for a calculation that will finally make the commitment fully justified, is its own kind of maturity. I want to talk about a specific modern trap that makes the leap even harder than it was in Kierkegaard's time. The trap of the highlight reel. Because now, when you're standing at the threshold of a decision, you're not just comparing your actual options against each other. You're comparing them against the curated, edited, best moments version of everyone else's choices that you see constantly online. The relationship you're hesitating to commit to gets compared not just to other realistic relationships, but to the impossibly polished version of other people's relationships that circulates online. The version with all the difficult, ordinary, unglamorous parts edited out. The career path you're keeping vague gets compared not just to other realistic paths, but to the highlight reels of people who seem to have figured it all out, whose success looks effortless because you're only seeing the moments they chose to share. This comparison is almost impossible to win because you're comparing a real, full, three-dimensional option with its ordinary difficulties and its unglamorous Tuesdays against an edited highlight reel that was never representative of anyone's actual full experience, including the person who posted it. And the effect is to make every real commitment look insufficient. Every real relationship looks less exciting than the curated ones online. Every real career path looks slower and more ordinary than the highlight reels suggest other people's paths are. This comparison doesn't help you make a better decision. It just makes you perpetually dissatisfied with whatever real, full, three-dimensional choice you actually have access to, because it's being measured against something that was never real in the first place. Recognizing this, actually seeing the comparison for what it is part of what makes the leap possible. You stop trying to find a real option that can compete with a fictional edited standard, and you start evaluating your actual choices against other actual choices, which is a much fairer and much more honest comparison. I want to talk about what happens to identity when you refuse to leap for too long, because there's a specific cost here that's separate from the missed depth, the missed mastery, the missed intimacy. It's a cost to your actual sense of who you are. When you commit to something, a relationship, a path, a set of values, you find out things about yourself that simply aren't available to someone who's still hovering at the threshold. You discover what you're actually capable of when retreat isn't an option. You find capacities you didn't know you had because you'd never been in a situation that required them. The person who never commits doesn't just miss out on depth in their relationships or mastery in their work. They miss out on becoming a specific person at all. They remain, in a real sense, a set of possibilities rather than an actuality. Interesting, perhaps, full of potential, certainly, but never quite anyone in particular. This is uncomfortable to hear because our culture often celebrates exactly this kind of openness as a virtue. Staying flexible, keeping your options open, not boxing yourself in. There's a kernel of wisdom in that. Genuine rigidity, refusing to ever reconsider anything, is its own problem. But there's a difference between healthy flexibility and a permanent refusal to ever actually become someone, which is what happens when the avoidance of commitment becomes the default mode of an entire life. Kierkegaard would say that the person who never leaps remains, in a sense, unborn. Not literally, but in terms of having actually become a self with specific commitments, specific values, a specific shape, rather than an undefined set of possibilities that never resolved into anything. This is one of the more unsettling implications of his work. It suggests that identity itself, the actual experience of knowing who you are, requires commitment. You don't first figure out who you are and then commit to a life that matches it. You become who you are partly through the commitments you make and the experience of living inside them. Which means waiting until you know yourself well enough to commit confidently might be exactly backward. The knowing, in significant part, comes after the leap, not before it. I want to address the specific fear of foreclosure because I think it's at the root of a lot of the modern resistance to commitment. Foreclosure means closing off possibilities, and in a culture that has trained you to see every closed door as a loss, foreclosure feels almost universally bad. Every time you commit to one thing, you're foreclosing on everything else that thing excludes. But here's something worth sitting with. Foreclosure isn't only loss. It's also the precondition for depth. A field with infinite paths radiating outward in every direction looks, from a distance, like the most free possible position. You could go anywhere, but standing at the center of that field, never choosing a direction, you never actually travel anywhere. The infinite possibility is, paradoxically, a kind of total stillness. Walking down one specific path forecloses on all the others, but it's also the only way to actually arrive somewhere, to see the specific things that exist only along that path, to develop the specific capacities that only emerge from sustained travel in one direction, to reach a destination instead of remaining permanently at the crossroads, admiring how many directions are available. Kierkegaard's leap is, in this sense, a trade. You give up the abstract freedom of infinite possibility in exchange for the concrete freedom of actually arriving somewhere, of actually becoming something specific rather than remaining a permanent set of options. Most people, when they're honest with themselves, want the second kind of freedom more than the first. They just haven't been taught to see it as freedom at all, because our culture has spent decades training people to experience open options as the highest value and committed depth as something almost suspicious, limiting, narrowing, a kind of giving up. It isn't giving up. It's the only way anything real ever gets built. One more thing before I close, because it matters specifically for the relationships in your life. If you've recognized yourself in this, if you know you've been hovering at a threshold, keeping options open, never quite leaping, I want you to consider what this has been costing the people who love you, not just what it's been costing you. Someone who is in a relationship with a person who hasn't fully committed experiences something specific. A persistent low-level uncertainty, a sense of being loved conditionally, provisionally, in a way that's always slightly held back. They feel the hovering even when they can't name it directly. This isn't a guilt trip, it's just worth being honest about. The cost of your own hesitation doesn't stay contained to you. It ripples outward to anyone who's waiting for you to actually arrive. In the relationship, in the commitment, in the life you keep almost choosing. And the gift of finally leaping, of finally closing the other doors and choosing fully, isn't only a gift to yourself, it's a gift to the people who have been standing with you at the threshold, wondering when or if you were going to walk through. That's worth remembering when the fear of foreclosure gets loud. You're not the only one affected by the choice to keep waiting. Let me close with something practical. If you're standing at a threshold right now, a relationship you haven't fully committed to, a path you've been keeping vague, a decision you've been gathering information about for far longer than any new information could actually help. I want you to ask yourself the question underneath the hesitation. Not, what if I'm wrong? Not, what else might be out there? The question is, have I actually decided, underneath all the comparison and evaluation, do I already know which way this is going, and am I just delaying the declaration because declaring it means giving up the comfort of still deciding? If the honest answer is yes, if you already know, then the leap isn't really a leap into the unknown. It's the act of finally acting on something you've already concluded. And if the honest answer is genuinely no, if you really don't know yet, then the work isn't more external comparison. It's the quieter, harder work of inwardness Kierkegaard described. Sitting with the actual question, honestly, without the noise of infinite options distracting you from what you actually want. Either way, the path forward isn't more options. It's the leap you've been standing at the edge of for longer than you've wanted to admit. You don't need more certainty before you take it. Certainty was never going to arrive. It comes after, through the actual living, not before, through more comparison. So the only real question left is whether you're willing to leap without it. That's the whole challenge. Not finding more certainty, living without needing it first. That's what the leap actually is. And it's available to you, right now, whenever you're ready to stop circling and finally walk through. For the comments, what's the leap you've been standing at the edge of? You don't have to have made it yet. Just name what it is. I'll see you in the next one.